The Minnesota Timberwolves made arguably the biggest move of this offseason with a trade for three-time Defensive Player of the Year Rudy Gobert. Because Gobert is such a polarizing player, this move yielded some pretty confident opinions from both sides, with many arguing that Minnesota was robbed blind, while others believed them to be one of the best teams in basketball. To truly evaluate just how good this Timberwolves team is though, we first have to look at what Rudy provides, starting on the offensive end. He lacks in quite a few of the traditional skills that come to mind when you hear the word offense. His touch is lackluster at best, he can't really handle the ball, rarely ever creates his own shot even with a huge mismatch, and isn't a very capable passer. What he is though, is one of the league's premier pick and roll bigs. He's a massive screener, using his giant stature to free up ball handlers and off-ball movers at a high rate, and his mobility at 7'2" makes him a huge target when rolling towards the rim, where he's a pretty great interior finisher. Of course, he can outreach just about anyone as a lob threat, and he's got enough range to throw them down anywhere near the vicinity of the basket, whether that's on the move or from the dunker spot. He's also great at establishing his position for easy entry passes and dump-offs, and always goes up strong right off the catch. As a result, he draws a ton of trips to the line, and although he's not a very good free throw shooter, a near 70% foul shot is still contributing to efficient offensive results. And that's the whole thing with Rudy. As an 80% finisher within 3 feet of the basket who is consistently drawing fouls, there has to be a body on him at all times, which in itself is a pretty effective form of pressuring the rim. Take this play for example. Gobert landing the initial screen puts the point of attack defender on Clarkson's hip and forces the opposing big to contain the ball. This means that it's the corner defender's job to rotate over and take away the roll, which then leaves a wide open 3-point shot. You'll see the same thing when he's hanging near the paint as a vertical threat. Bogdanovich beating the first line of defense forces Kleba to cut off the drive, and when Bullock drops to take away the interior pass, no one is left to contest the corner. He also requires attention whenever a shot goes up because he's phenomenal on the offensive glass, and almost always puts them back up for easy points. So while he's not the type of player to really pop out on the stat sheet, and definitely won't be doing any outside shooting, there is still some value in his style of offense, and Minnesota really lacked this sort of rim-running interior presence. I think this impact will be felt most through the play of D'Angelo Russell, who hasn't really found much of an identity since getting traded from the Nets back in 2019. Russell's got some nice traits as a scorer. He's a pretty good pull-up jump shooter and a very good ball handler, which he uses to his advantage to probe and hunt for weak spots in the defense. This opens up a fair amount of playmaking opportunities, which is where he's able to utilize his best skill, elite passing. He's got a super quick release and very high anticipation for when and where a window's going to open, which allows for some extremely high leverage dimes. A lot of these deliveries come on the move, showcasing his lightning quick decision making off of screens and handoffs. His specialty is those pocket passes to rollers and cutters, often shoveling the ball through seemingly impossible gaps, which lead to high quality shots at the rim. He's also a strong skip passer, punishing help and rotations from anywhere on the floor, and occasionally mixes in some strong manipulation to move these defenders around and free up those interior finds. In order for these opportunities to consistently present themselves, there has to be some sort of scoring pressure, and because D'Lo doesn't get downhill much at all, he really benefits from having a rim runner that forces the defense into tough spots. The problem is, he hasn't really had one next to him for quite a while now. If we take a look at every big man he's played with over the past 3 seasons, you've got Karl-Anthony Towns, Naz Reid, Jared Vanderbilt, Juancho Hernangomez, and Willie Cauley-Stein. Take it 1 year further and you arrive in 2019, where he played next to Jarrett Allen. In this season, he generated just under 63% of his overall offense in the pick and roll. His impact metrics and statistical indicators across the board look like a clear outlier, and he even received his one and only All-Star selection. Now, I'm not suggesting he'll be in contention for an All-Star spot, but I do think he'll bring a lot more to the table next to a top-tier roller. This also means we'll probably see a lot more of Karl-Anthony Towns in a more perimeter-oriented off-ball role, which I think is where he's at his best. He's an all-time great shooter at his position, capable of knocking down long-range jumpers off the dribble, off the catch, and on the move. His release is quick, with little to no lift from the floor, which means he only needs minimal space for high quality looks, while his 7-foot height allows him to shoot right over the top of most defenders. This results in aggressive coverage on the perimeter and lots of hard closeouts, which he's able to counter through a strong drive and finish game. His first step is very effective, commonly just exploding around his matchup while using long strides and shoulder bumps to create some more separation. You'll also see him use lots of fakes and jab steps to open up these lanes a bit more, which makes it much tougher to defend when he's facing up in isolation. On top of this brilliant scoring, he's also a skilled passer with tons of different deliveries and some occasionally nice creativity. With that being said though, he really lacks the processing speed and decision making you would want from a primary creator, hurting his ability to generate efficient offense from the post, where he really struggles at dealing with double teams. This is the main reason I prefer him in more of an off-ball role on the outside, where he's a very active mover, great cutter, and provides great spacing. He's an active and dynamic screening threat, which adds some interesting offensive avenues for Minnesota to explore with him next to Gobert, along with the nightmare of a pairing they are on the offensive glass. In order for Cat to truly be maximized within this style of play though, the Timberwolves need someone who can consistently pressure the defense on ball and serve as that lead creator, which is why so much of their outlook as a team rides on the development of Anthony Edwards. Ant is already a great pull-up three-point shooter who does a ton of work in isolation, creating a lot of separation one-on-one through step-backs and sidesteps. Defenders are reluctant to put too much pressure on the ball when he's going to work like this because you never know when he'll just explode downhill and get into the heart of the defense. His physical profile is obscene. He's extremely strong with these super broad shoulders that, when paired with his ridiculous first step, allow him to overwhelm just about any matchup he's up against. He's great at changing directions with a crafty use of strides and extra steps to shed defenders near the basket, and you'll notice he likes to use his offhand to push on the gather as another method of freeing up a bit more space for the finish. With a 41-inch vertical and a decent amount of length, he's shown some awesome above the rim capability. He uses that sturdy build and strength well as a shield when jumping into rim protection, can finish through contact at a high level, and makes great use of his hang time by moving the ball to different angles upon release. Still, he's only entering his third season as an NBA player, so there are key areas for improvement. He hasn't yet gotten comfortable leveraging the threat of those drives into short mid-range jumpers, which is something most elite slashers tend to develop over the years. He also commonly goes into these attacks with one motive: to score, when applying that much pressure to the rim is the most effective way to generate an advantage for the team around him. He's a decent passer in flashes, but struggles with tunnel vision, which as of right now makes him a lot more of a scorer than a true primary creator. I do think having a massive target, both in the dunker spot and when coming off of screens, could help with this development quite a bit, and if he finds a way to improve in both of these areas for year 3, he has a real shot at being this team's best player. As for the rest of the squad, they've got a little bit of everything offensively. Fourth-year guard Jalen Noel has flown under the radar as someone who's shown consistent growth as both a rim and three-point creator. 21-year-old Jaden McDaniels remains an athletic cutter who already has decent chops as both a ball handler and passer. They've got guys at multiple positions who can initiate offense, such as Jordan McLaughlin and Kyle Anderson, and they added a great movement shooter in Bryn Forbes. For a team that just finished with the league's 8th best offense, I think they pretty clearly improved there. But what's a lot more intriguing to me is how they'll look on the defensive end. Before we get into their defense though, I want to give a quick shout out to Basketball Index for helping with this analysis and the making of this video. If you're not familiar with the site, they provide tons of statistical measurements, tools, and easily accessible graphics to further guide your understanding of the sport. My personal favorite is their Player Profiles tab, where you can easily see and sort through large amounts of data on any player in the NBA with the exact level of detail you want. For example, I earlier referenced Karl-Anthony Towns being one of the best shooters ever at his position, and on this page I'm presented with various metrics detailing his ability to create and make these shots, along with how he stacks up against his peers. This is just one of the many useful tools found on the site that help guide me and many others through their analysis. And by signing up with the code VENUE30, you can get 30% off your first month subscription. I'll leave a link in the description below for anyone interested in signing up, and with that being said, let's take a dive into how this team will look defensively. With the addition of Rudy Gobert, Minnesota is getting this generation's premier paint defender and one of the best in NBA history. His height and staggering 7'9" wingspan provide a huge presence down low, and when paired with his perfect positioning, allow him to turn attempts away from the rim more than anyone. When the ball does get there, he's an elite shot blocker who almost never bites on fakes, and because he holds his ground so well with very little error, he rarely ever sends players to the line. Opponents shot more than 13% below their expected accuracy at the rim with Gobert as the closest defender last season, and when one individual guy can make scoring that difficult where it's most efficient for the entire opposing team, he's able to control that entire end of the floor. Many point to his lack of mobility as a reason for why he can't maintain this value in the playoffs, and while it's true that versatility is a huge point of emphasis in modern NBA defense, he's not just one of those lumbering bigs who's unplayable on the perimeter. For his size, he controls his body extremely well, which helps him smother ball handlers with his length and run shooters off the line. He's still subject to quick changes of direction and speed as most players of his mold are, but with the way this Timberwolves team is currently constructed, I feel a lot more comfortable with him defending in space. Utah never had a true secondary rim protector next to Rudy, so in the event he did step out of the paint or get beaten off the dribble, there just wasn't another line of defense. This isn't the case with his new squad, as they have multiple players capable of playing this role. I'm most excited about Jaden McDaniels, whose potential on that end of the floor is through the roof. What immediately stands out when watching him is his versatility. As a rangy, athletic forward who can both defend on the perimeter and in the paint, there's no shortage of roles you can put him in and expect great results. The same goes for Kyle Anderson, who's already proven to be an awesome defensive veteran. He's one of those players who just always knows when and where to position himself off the ball, whether that's as a helper or in the pick and roll. He also offers some decent rim protection and is relatively switchable, although you probably don't want him matching up with shiftier guards. With two versatile forwards who can play multiple roles next to the league's best paint defender, there's a pretty clear structure that makes me optimistic about what their defense could possibly look like, if the rest of the team completely buys in. For years now, Cat has been one of the worst defenders at the center position, and by sliding him to the 4 next to Rudy, they're clearly looking to make it as difficult as possible for teams to exploit his weaknesses. In space, he's essentially a giant traffic cone, which makes him an easy attack point in the pick and roll. But with Gobert in the primary action instead, he could look a lot better in the role of a roamer. The one thing he actually does at a decent level is alter shots at the rim. So by allowing him to do just that one thing as much as possible, the effects of his deficiencies might not be felt to nearly the same degree. D'Angelo Russell is another guy who has some evident individual struggles, but last season looked better in a redefined role. He exemplifies what it means to completely buy in, playing with a ton of activity and engagement as a helper, where he could rely on his high IQ to mitigate some of those physical limitations. He's still far from a positive defender, but a smart, high-effort point guard who's a strong communicator isn't that hard to hide and find ways to work around. That's why, again, so much of their success rides on the shoulders of Anthony Edwards. In order for this team to compete as a high-level playoff defense, in my opinion, Ant has to bring value at the point of attack. He has all of the athletic tools, is really switchable for his position, and is already a decent screen navigator. So in flashes, we've seen some stretches of solid perimeter defense. Him taking that step into a legitimately good point of attack defender leaves their starting lineup with 2 deployable on-ball guys, 3 capable rim protectors, and all 5 engaged within those roles. When combined with some depth consisting of nice length and athleticism, this sounds to me like a team that could end up looking elite on that side of the ball, if things go right. In 2022, they had a relatively average team defense, and the addition of Gobert alone makes them a threat to grab a top spot in the regular season, as we saw for years when he consistently dragged more than subpar casts into strong defensive units. So where does that leave them as an overall team? Last season, they finished with the 10th best net rating in the NBA, consisting of the number 8 offense and number 13 defense, both of which I expect to improve. Regardless of how you feel about Gobert, there's no denying that he's one of the league's most impactful players, especially as a defensive floor raiser in the regular season. Along with some of their other additions and expected progression from a few of their younger players, I think they have a real shot at being one of those teams that wins a boatload of games. With how stacked the West is right now, I'm not sure quite where they land, but I wouldn't at all be surprised if we're heading into the 2023 playoffs and they're a 1 or 2 seed. All things considered though, I do have a hard time seeing them as a top tier contender. They've got a great collection of offensive and defensive players that make them strong on both ends of the floor, but most of these guys are good on just one or the other, where most title teams consist of those who can do a bit of both. If Edwards takes a massive third-year leap similar to that of Ja Morant and is already a polished defensive player, my evaluation could definitely change. But with a more modest approach to his development, I don't view the Minnesota Timberwolves as huge threats just yet. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website, podcast, and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you thought of this trade for the Timberwolves and just how good you think they are. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.